Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time of damp cloaks, whispering shadows, and very questionable hygiene. You're crouched in an alley that smells like pickled fish and chamber pot runoff, somewhere in the distance. A church bell tolls, and no, that's not a dinner invitation. It's a warning. Because tonight, you've got a job, and it might just kill you. Welcome to the world of the medieval assassin. There's no HR department here. No cozy onboarding process. You didn't scroll past a hiring now, cloaked cutthroat listing on some town notice board. No, your recruitment happened after someone watched you stab a chicken with too much enthusiasm or steal apples using nothing but a distracted glance and a pocket mirror. Maybe your parents died mysteriously. Maybe you were orphaned during a famine. Either way, someone found you, saw potential, and you woke up days later tied to a chair while a man with no eyebrows asked if you feared death. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're about 12 when it starts. Old enough to run. Young enough not to question orders. They don't give you a name, just a nickname. Moth. You think it's poetic until you realize it's because you're drawn to light and usually end up burned. Training begins in what looks like a deconsecrated abbey. The kind of place where dust doesn't settle it, plots. Your roommates are other kids with haunted eyes, one of whom collects rat skulls for fun. Your days are a mash of climbing, silent walking, blindfolded sword drills, and lectures on silent eliminations, delivered by a man who smells like vinegar and disappointment. You're fed gruel that might contain lentils or pebbles, and sleep on straw that's at least 60% flea. They teach you to kill with knives, ropes, powder, and if you're particularly clever, your bare hands. A mainstream historical fact here. Some medieval assassin sects like the Hashashin, yes. That's where we get the word assassin trained, using hashish and religious fervor to convince recruits that death wasn't the end, just an inconvenient stop along the way. You're told tales of men who leapt from towers at a master's command, just to prove loyalty. No pressure. You also learn the less glamorous skills, lockpicking, sewer navigation, and how to avoid leprosy by not drinking water from suspicious puddles. A fringe tidbit. Some early assassin groups use trained monkeys to deliver poison or spy on enemies. You never see one, but a boy in your cohort swears his uncle was killed by a monkey with a tiny knife. You believe him. He has that look. Night is the worst. Not just because it's cold and full of lice, but because it's when the real tests happen. You're woken by a bucket of water and told, kill the candle. At first, you think it's metaphorical? Then you realize they mean literally snuff it without making a sound. Fail. You get caned, succeed. You still get caned, just less hard. Historians still argue whether all of this harsh training was common across assassin orders or romanticized later by storytellers who thought child endangerment sounded edgy. Either way, your muscles ache, your fingers bleed, and you start to dream in shadow and dagger. You lose friends. Some vanish overnight. Others fall during live drills, which, surprise, means someone gave a trainee a real blade and told them to improvise. You learn not to get attached. Even to the guy who makes the best rat stew. He calls it surprise protein. By your 15th year, you're barely human. You speak in code. You move like fog. You fear eye contact. There's a quiet pride when your handler, a man who has never smiled, says, "That one's ready?" You never know who he's talking to. But the next morning, you're given your first mission scroll, tied with twine, sealed with wax, and likely to end with your face in a moat. You know how this works now. No glory, no songs, just dirt roads, cold steel, and a list of names. You were never supposed to want more, but in the back of your mind, maybe while scrubbing dried blood off your tunic or hiding beneath a dead cart, you still wonder, did anyone actually choose this life? Or were you all just swept into it by war, religion, and someone else's ambition? Too late now. The candle's out, the door creaks open, and your handler whispers 2 words that chill you more than any winter wind. Begin walking. You begin walking, just like he said. There's no map, no directions, just the rough idea that your target lives 3 towns away and doesn't particularly enjoy being assassinated. Funny how they never do. Your boots are too thin, the mud's too thick, and every time you pass a peasant, you try to look like you belong, which, let's face it, is hard when you're 14 and dressed like someone's ominous cousin from the woods. Training might be over, but the real lesson is just beginning. This job doesn't come with breaks, boundaries, or breathable pants. Each day of travel doubles as a refresher course in why this sucks. Taught by the landscape itself, you cross creaking rope bridges, get chased off a noble's land for suspicious loafing, and spend one night crammed into a hollow tree with a nest of very territorial owls. You're not alone. Another recruit named Elm has been assigned as your backup. She's quieter than you, which is saying something, and she communicates mostly in shrugs and glares. She's also absurdly good with knots. Like, weirdly good. You once watched her tie a noose using only her toes while eating boiled turnips. The physical demands of being a medieval assassin are brutal. You climb walls slick with moss. You leap from rooftops not designed for leaping. And you practice rolling falls into pig troughs to break your descent. By the way, pig troughs are not as cushiony as they sound. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval towns were built vertically, with narrow lanes and overhanging buildings, which meant rooftops weren't just picturesque. They were a critical part of any escape plan. You learn to judge the distance between chimneys like most people read street signs. Your muscles never stop aching. There's a constant, low-level bruising in your ribs, like someone installed a medieval organ in there and it's slightly too big. You eat when you can, usually stale bread or whatever. You can barter using silence and sharp looks. One time, you trade a lockpick for half a boiled onion. It's the best meal of the week. The worst part, the blisters. You have so many, you start naming them. Sir Ocelot becomes your left heel. Elm finds this hilarious. You consider that progress. Training never really stops. Every village is a chance to blend. Every inn a potential trap. Every farm dog an accidental enemy with an excellent sense of smell. You practice lying with a straight face. Oh, I'm just a wandering tinker. M'lady, I sell inks and parchment. Good sir? No, I definitely don't have throwing knives in my sleeves. What a wild idea. The fringe tidbit here. Some assassination schools force trainees to survive entire months without speaking at all. No talking, even in sleep. If they slipped up, tongue burned with a hot coin. You didn't go through that, thankfully, but you did endure whisper fasting, a week of communication, only via foot taps and blinking. Elm, and you develop a system. 2 taps for danger. 3 for I saw a chicken and thought of dinner. It's weirdly efficient, but pain isn't just physical. There's the mental grind, the constant hyper-awareness. Every window might hide a bowman. Every bread seller could be a spy. Your mind stays clenched like a fist. Historians still argue whether assassin groups intentionally used sleep deprivation and starvation to heighten paranoia, or if that was just a side effect of living on the fringe of society. Either way, you sleep with one eye open, and the nightmares get creative. You reach the outskirts of your target's town by the 5th day. There's a checkpoint at the gate. 2 guards, both bored, both armed. You and Elm fall into your cover. She's your mute sister, and you're an apprentice to a wandering tooth remover. No one questions it. People hate dentists then too. Inside, everything smells like cabbage and wet wool. The buildings lean like they're mid-whisper. You gather intel through casual overhearing. Your target, a merchant who's been quietly selling battle maps to both sides of a local feud. He's rich, paranoid, and reportedly sleeps in a chest to confuse would-be attackers. You almost respect it. You stake out his routine for days. That's another surprise. Most assassinations aren't quick. They're patient, meticulous. You spend hours just watching, sketching floor layouts in the dirt with a stick. You memorize his patterns. When he eats, when he coughs, when he visits the outhouse, which, by the way, is far too often for someone with that much money. Then the test comes not from him, but from the streets. You're cornered by a group of local boys who think you look shifty. They throw rocks. One nicks your eyebrow. Elm steps in, quick and vicious, using a well-placed knee and a stick to remind them that you're not the kind of kids to mess with. Afterward, you sit in a hayloft, silently applying moss to your wound and trying not to scream. Elm hands you a piece of boiled bark. "Chew it," she mutters. "It helps. A bit." You feel the shift that night. The way every fiber in your body aligns. Tomorrow is the day. No more watching. No more planning. Just execution of both plan and person. You lie on the roof, staring at stars that look way too smug. You think of your handler, the Abbey, the rat stew, the candle. You wonder how many of those kids are still alive. The next breath you take feels like someone else's. You close your eyes and fall asleep with your dagger tucked into your boot, your heart in your throat, and a dream on your lips that maybe, just maybe, you'll live through this. The next morning, the sky wears a woolen gray, the kind that makes the air taste damp and the rooftops shine like fish scales. You rise before dawn, feet numb, brain buzzing. Elm doesn't say much. She just nods, checks her laces, and melts into the crowd like she was never there to begin with. She's running interference, while you lucky you get to do the stabbing. Your target lives above a tannery, which is convenient because the smell alone discourages witnesses. Think of boiled leather, spoiled milk, and dead dreams. That's what's wafting up from the vats below. If you weren't trying to kill someone, you might feel sorry for the workers down there, probably immune to both joy and nasal function by now. You approach from the rooftops, creeping across the slick shingles, crouching low. Beneath your cloak, your gear rattles just enough to remind you of what you're doing. Inside your belt, a dagger recently sharpened, a small pouch of ground poppy for putting people to sleep or, if misused, into permanent nap mode, and a wax-sealed note that says something cryptic like "Leave no ash behind." You don't ask questions. Sliding into the upper window, you realize 2 things. First, the floorboards creak like a choir of angry mice. Second, your target is awake. Of course he is. He's pacing, muttering, wearing what looks like an entire fur rug and sweating like a nervous roast pig. His bodyguard, because of course there's a bodyguard, is dozing in the corner, cradling a crossbow like it's his sweetheart. You freeze, then shift your weight, then step forward. 3 slow breaths. You draw the dagger. Your target turns. It's chaos. He screams. The guard jolts. You lunge. There's a thud, a crack, and the unexpected sensation of your dagger snapping halfway through the job. Medieval blades, especially cheap ones, weren't exactly known for their reliability. Mainstream historical fact. Iron weapons of the time were often brittle, especially if not forged by a master smith. You got yours from a guy named Ren, who also sells bootleg candles. Lesson learned. You improvise. Elbow to the throat, knee to the gut, and finally, mercifully, a slip of the poppy powder right into your target's mouth as he tries to yell. He gags, slumps. You check his pulse. Unclear. Might be sleeping. Might be dead. Elm will argue later that you overdosed him into next week. The guard isn't a problem. Turns out, the guy sleeps like the dead. Or maybe he is dead hard to tell in that lighting. You leave the room quietly, heart hammering like a festival drum, and make your way out through the roof hatch. You leap across a gap between buildings too wide. You slip. One hand catches the ledge. A tile shatters beneath your foot. For a second, you hang there, listening to the city murmur below like a beast with a belly full of bones. Then Elm appears, hand extended. She hauls you up without a word. You both crouch there, panting. Her expression says it all. You almost got us killed over a guy who bathes in bear fur. The job's done, sort of. No one's chasing you yet, which is a win. But you're bleeding your palms a shredded mess. Elm wraps it in a scrap of linen that smells like mint. Stole it from a herbalist? She mutters. You nod, grateful and woozy. You retreat to the safe house, if you can call it that. It's more of a shack behind a coop, and the chickens are incredibly judgmental. You wait there, eating boiled roots, for word from your handler. Days pass. You think about what you've done, not philosophically, more like, did I really break my best blade on a fur merchant? Fringe tilbeat for you. Some assassins, especially in Middle Eastern sects, were known to stage fake deaths after a mission, hiding in tombs or among plague victims to throw off suspicion. You don't go that far, but you do spend one night pretending to be a mourning cousin at a fake funeral. Elm even provides the tears. Finally, the message arrives, a black feather tucked in your satchel. That means, job accepted, payment pending. You're not sure if the guy's dead, asleep, or just retired to a monastery to reevaluate his life. Doesn't matter. You hit the quota. You'll live. Maybe. Historians still argue whether most assassins had to confirm kills or just operate on a best guess system. Some orders kept detailed logs. Others, like yours, apparently ran on vibes and rumors. The problem now is getting out of town. Your face might be remembered. You duck through alleys, change cloaks twice, and try not to limp too. Obviously, Elm vanishes again, standard protocol. You'll meet at the river fork in 2 days. If she's not there, you assume the worst. If she is there, you pretend you never doubted it. You leave as the sun sets, slipping past guards distracted by a public flogging. You'd feel bad, but the guy being whipped did steal 6 ducks and punch a bishop. So, hard to argue with consequences. Your feet crunch gravel, your body aches, your hands tremble, and as the town disappears behind you, you allow yourself one deep sigh. Then you remember, you just used your last blade. Time to find a new one, preferably not from Ren. The road out of town is cruel. Every stone finds your blister. Every route plots your downfall. You've got no money, no decent shoes, and no weapon that doesn't resemble a bent spoon. Still, you've survived your first mission. That's something. It's not nothing. You meet Elm at the river fork. She's already there, leaning against a tree like she didn't just outrun a posse, cross 3 bridges, and probably poison a dog, don't ask. She holds out a new blade, well, new in the sense that it hasn't snapped yet. You eye it with suspicion. It's cursed, she says flatly, tossing it to you, hilt first. Cursed. She shrugs. Might scream when you stab someone, might just fall apart, was half price. You mutter a thanks and sheath it anyway, because when you're a medieval assassin, beggars can't be choosers, and murder tools come in 3 varieties: rusty, cursed, or missing. Let's talk gear, or, more accurately, the tragic lack of reliable gear. You'd think assassins would have access to cutting-edge gadgets. Nope. Your reality is a sack of second-hand tools and a prayer. Your dagger has a chipped edge. Your crossbow's winch squeaks like a scared mouse. Your poison vials are stoppered with wax and wishful thinking. And it gets worse when it rains, which it always does. Crossbows, for instance, hate water. The string slackens. The bolts misfire, and unless you dry it by a fire and re-oil it, it's basically an expensive stick. You once saw a guy lose 2 fingers trying to fire a damp bow. He now goes by claw. Mainstream historical fact. The medieval period saw the rise of various assassin tools: daggers, garrotes, blowpipes, but most weren't standardized. Killers had to adapt to the target, the terrain, and whatever they could hide in a boot. If you're lucky, you get a stiletto blade, slim and good for slipping between ribs. If you're less lucky, you get a rock and a lot of free time. Elm's personal favorite is a garrote made from braided horsehair. Never snaps, she says. You nod politely and quietly vow never to fall asleep near her. Fringe tilbit. Some assassins were said to carry wooden daggers soaked in poison. Not because they worked better, but because they bypassed metal detection rituals used by certain guards. You tried one once. The tip snapped inside a potato during practice. You don't talk about it. There's also the issue of concealment. You don't exactly wear a tool belt. Everything has to be hidden inside boots, behind belts, even stitched into cloaks. Once, you carried a blade in a fake religious scroll. The priest who caught you with it was so impressed, he let you go. That's divine mischief, he said. You still think about that guy. Then there's poison. Everyone's favorite clean method. Except it's not. It's messy, unreliable, and terrifying to handle. You carry vials of belladonna, monk's hood, and a mysterious red powder that may or may not just be beetroot. Elm once mistook her hemlock for thyme. The stew was memorable. You practice mixing in the woods, hunched over leaves like a cursed apothecary. Half the time, you give yourself a mild rash. Once, you made a smoke bomb that exploded prematurely and turned your eyebrows to ash. You wore a hood for a month. Birds avoided you. Historians still argue whether medieval poisoners were part of formal guilds or just freelancers with a love for plants and death. Some records suggest tightly organized circles, especially in places like Renaissance Italy. Others imply it was just whoever could find a toad and mash it into soup. Your guild, somewhere in between. They give you basic recipes, stern warnings, and one terrifying book bound in something that feels too warm. One of your weirder tools is a blowpipe. Not the cool kind from jungle films, this one is a hollowed-out goose bone. Elm found it in a market stall between a cracked amulet and a jar of teeth. You try it once, aiming at a rat. The dart bounces off. The rat looks offended. Eventually, you stop trusting your tools and start trusting your instincts. A knife is only as good as your timing. A rope is just string until your enemy's not looking. And a bottle of powder is more useful in the eyes than in the drink. You craft your own items, slowly. A throwing knife hammered from an old horseshoe. A padded cloak sewn with lead beads for stealthy falls. A wax-coated pouch that keeps your flint dry even in swampy terrain. You're not a master yet, but you're resourceful and tired. Mostly tired. One night, you and Elm huddle under a collapsed wagon. Rain drums on the wood above. She fiddles with a broken arrowhead, sharpening it against a rock. think we'll ever get real gear. You ask. She snorts. Real gear is for knights and nobles. We get trash and make it deadly. You smile, even if she can't see it. You drift off thinking about the future. Maybe one day, you'll have a blade that doesn't bend like cheese. Maybe someone will invent boots with soles that don't squeak. Maybe Elm's cursed dagger will turn out to be blessed by irony. Until then, you make do. You adapt. You sharpen. You survive. Because when everything you own is either rusty, cursed, or missing, you learn to become the real weapon. You reach the next town with a limp, a crusty bandage, and an accent that may or may not pass as Northern Shepherd. Elm insists you stop practicing it aloud because, in her words, you sound like a dying goat with a head cold. Disguises are your new uniform. No black cloaks or skull-emblazoned armor, just tatty robes, soot-darkened faces, and an ever-growing collection of backstories. You've been a goat herder, a scribe, a grieving widow, and once, for reasons you don't want to unpack, a traveling flute salesman who couldn't actually play the flute. Today, you're a monk, not a real one, of course. Just someone wearing a borrowed robe with the hood pulled low and a quiet air of divine purpose. You learned quickly that monks get ignored, or better, pitied. You even mumble prayers in Latin, though it's mostly butchered gibberish. Pax vobiscum becomes packs of biscuits if you're not paying attention. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries in medieval Europe were hotbeds of political gossip and hidden power, making them both risky and rewarding places for assassins to operate. Some real monks were spies. Others just had very juicy confession lists. Your target this time is a corrupt abbot, rich, well-fed, and deeply unpleasant. He skims off monastery donations, sells relics that are definitely just chicken bones, and reportedly had a visiting nun arrested for speaking with too much confidence. So yes, he's overdue for a spiritual exit. You infiltrate the abbey under the guise of a mute pilgrim seeking absolution. Elm helps you forge a pilgrimage badge from pewter and nail polish. She calls it her masterpiece of questionable theology. Inside, everything smells like wax and guilt. The walls are damp. The food is beige. And the monks chant with all the energy of a soggy cabbage. You blend easily. No one notices the extra face in the back pew. No one questions why you spend so much time near the abbot's quarters. Disguises are more than just costumes, they're armor. You learn how to carry yourself differently. When you're a monk, you move slow, speak softer or not at all, and keep your gaze low. When you're a merchant, you get loud and puffed up. When you're a peasant, you limp, because apparently no one trusts a healthy peasant. Fringe tidbit. Some assassins used trained animals as part of their ruses. Cats to deliver messages, birds to distract guards, even lice-infested cloaks to spread disease in enemy camps. You don't go that far, but you do once hide a knife inside a hollowed-out Bible. The irony alone nearly gets you smote. Historians still argue whether disguises were taught formally in assassin guilds or picked up on the job. Some documents describe entire lessons on social camouflage, while others suggest assassins just winged it with whatever was lying around like broken wigs or stolen shoes. Your own guild gave you one scroll with instructions like, "Be what they expect to see." Very inspiring, very vague. Back to the abbot. You shadow his routine. He prays at dawn, naps at midday, and yells at the kitchen staff for too much salt. You spend days watching, learning, adjusting your disguise. One night, you slip into his chamber and sprinkle a sleeping draft into his wine. It's a mix of valerian root and Elm's special blend, which smells like moldy socks and hits like a lullaby wrapped in bricks. Then you wait, when he's snoring like a drunken ox. You move, except plot twist, he wasn't alone. A junior monk had come to confess some sin or other. and now stands frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, holding a candle like it's a holy grenade. You freeze too, a single breath away from disaster. Elm always told you, lie big or run fast. You choose big. You drop your dagger, raise your hands, and in the deepest, most solemn voice you can manage, you whisper, "The Lord has summoned him." The monk blinks. "The Lord," he whispers. You nod gravely. "He was chosen." There's a long pause. Then the monk, clearly terrified, nods and backs out of the room like he's seen an angel or a demon hard to tell from your face in that lighting. You take the opportunity to finish the job. Quiet, quick, respectful. Even, you arrange the abbot's body to look peaceful. You even fold his hands like a child's drawing of a saint. And then, you're gone. Not a trace left. Well, except for Elm's masterpiece badge, which somehow ends up on the abbot's chest. You suspect she did it for fun. Outside the abbey walls, under a sky heavy with stars, you shed your disguise. The robe goes into the river. The fake sandals follow. You're you again, whatever that means. Elm appears beside you, grinning. "Pious work," she says. You chuckle, exhausted. The next village thinks you're traitors. The one after that, pilgrims again. Every face is a mask. Every word rehearsed. You dream in accents now. Wake up speaking French you don't actually know. Once, you even convinced a tax collector you were his long-lost cousin. He gave you 3 coins and half a sausage before realizing his cousin died 2 years ago. This job's not about strength. Not really. It's about slipping through cracks, wearing skin like costumes, knowing that sometimes the only thing more powerful than a blade is a good lie wrapped in the right tone. Because when the world expects a beggar, a monk, or a mute, they never see the blade coming. The crown pays in coin, but it also pays in problems. Your next contract comes sealed with a crimson wax crest, ornate and unmistakable, a royal sigil. You and Elm exchange a look. Royal work is rare. It's also complicated, full of whispered orders, double crosses, and the constant risk that your employer will have you killed just to tie up loose ends. Still, the pay, rumored to be a whole pouch of real silver coins, not just scraps or odd bits of foreign currency that smell like fish, enough to buy new boots, maybe even a warm bath. You're already dreaming. You travel east, cloaked and cautious, following the instructions written in finely inked code. You're to meet the client in a ruined chapel at dusk. Of course it's a ruined chapel. They never meet in cheerful bakeries or sunlit gardens. No, it has to be dramatic, dripping with vines and metaphors. Your contact turns out to be a man in velvet with a voice like dry parchment. He doesn't give his name, but he smells like lavender and political ambition. You will remove a problem, he says. A traitor to the throne. The traitor is a minor nobleman in the north. Whether it's true doesn't matter. You don't get to ask questions. You just get a name, a description. You're just part of that grand, invisible tradition. Elm is suspicious. Too clean, she mutters. No threats, no tests. Just a name and silver. Maybe they trust us. She snorts. Royalty trusts no one. If they do, they're either lying or already planning our funeral. You reach the nobleman's estate under cover of a traveling minstrel troupe. Elm plays a passable lute. You pretend to be blind. People are so eager to pity you. They let you into places your blades could never reach. It's almost insulting. You spend days gathering intel. Turns out, your target is kind, generous. He treats his servants well, pays his staff on time. He even donates food to nearby villages during winter. Not exactly the mustache-twirling villain you expected. He writes poetry too terrible. Heartfelt poems about oak trees and lost love. You almost feel bad. Almost. But orders are orders. The assassination is set for the night of the harvest feast. A crowded hall, dozens of guests. Your plan, poison in the wine. A classic, simple, elegant, hard to trace. You slip the vial into his cup, timed perfectly, and then he doesn't drink it. Instead, he offers the cup to a young maid who'd spilled her own. She curtsies, grateful. She lifts it to her lips. Elm stops her. A tripping incident, she claims. The girl drops the cup. The poison never reaches her. Later, in the shadows, you and Elm argue in whispers. He wasn't the problem, she says. The client is, you agree, but walking away from a royal contract. That's dangerous. That's suicide wrapped in defiance. Fringe tidbit. There were cases in medieval courts where assassins were tasked with testing their loyalty given impossible missions to see whether they'd obey without question. Refuse, and you were branded a traitor. Accept, and you were complicit in something worse. No right answers, only shorter lifespans. Historians still argue whether these moral tests were common practice or just cautionary tales whispered among assassins to explain sudden disappearances. You and Elm make a choice. Instead of completing the mission, you send a message, not to the client, but to the nobleman. A warning, anonymous. You advise him to fake illness and travel south. Avoid royal roads. It reads, trust only those who owe you bread. Then, you vanish. You leave the estate before sunrise, moving fast and quiet. No loot, no silver, just silence. That night, you sleep in a hayloft beneath a sky brimming with guilt. The next week is tense. You expect pursuit, a knife in the dark, an accusation in the next village. But nothing comes. The message must have worked. Or maybe they've already put your names on someone else's list. Elm starts sleeping with her blade unsheathed. You avoid towns for a while. Stick to back roads. Live off wild onions and regret. And still, part of you wonders, was the royal job ever real? Or just a trap? A game? Some noble's idea of entertainment? You don't know. What you do know is this. Royal contracts come dressed in gold. But underneath, they're made of rot. And if you want to survive, you'll need to be twice as slippery as the crown and 3 times as lucky. So much for get in, get out. You'd think the hard part of assassinating someone would be the actual, assassinating. But no. The real nightmare. The escape. Always the escape. You plan the job down to the last flicker of a candle disguises timing, route. But the universe loves nothing more than to laugh in your hooded face the moment you think you're clear. Your latest job should have been textbook. A corrupt moneylender, well-connected and well-hated, scheduled to appear at a brothel he secretly financed. The layout simple, guard rotations predictable, entry point. A second-story window above a very accommodating chicken coop. You and Elm work it like a play. Quick climb, silent dispatch, clean exit. Except you step on the wrong tile in the hallway literally, and it lets out a screech like a haunted goose. Somewhere downstairs, a guard drops his mug. You freeze, foot still midair. Elm gives you a look that translates roughly to seriously you run. Not elegantly, not gracefully, definitely not quietly. You leap over a startled kitchen maid, tumble down a spiral staircase, and head straight into a courtyard full of very alert guards who clearly weren't paid to ignore you. This is the assassin's dirty secret. Get in, get out. is more of a suggestion than a rule. Mainstream historical fact, many assassinations in medieval Europe turned into messy pursuits. Clean kills were rare. The architectural quirks of castles' narrow staircases, murder holes, courtyards designed for defense meant that once you were seen, the entire building seemed designed to keep you inside forever. You sprint through corridors like a rat in a maze made entirely of armored people and bad decisions. Behind you, the shout goes up, intruder bells ring, doors slam. Someone throws a jug at your head. It smells like fish and failure. Elm meets you by the servants' entrance, barely out of breath. She tosses a smoke bomb homemade, slightly lopsided, more theatrical than practical. It fills the air with choking gray fog and the scent of burning time. You stumble out coughing, stumble again as your cloak snags on a nail, and finally tumble into the night with all the grace of a drunken goose. You lose them in the alleyways. Barely. A goat helps, blocking the path like some small, angry guardian of the shadows. You don't question it. You just run. Later, hidden in a hay cart bound for anywhere but here. Elm leans back and says, "You owe that goat a favor." You nod. You make a mental note, bring goat an apple someday. The reality of your job is that the clean getaway is a myth. Too many things can go wrong. Weather, walls, screaming noblewomen who just happened to open the wrong door at the wrong time. You once got caught mid-escape because a street performer started juggling swords and drew a crowd blocking your exit. You had to pretend to faint from holy visions just to get through. Fringe tidbits, some assassin guilds hired lookouts to create diversions, from fires to bar brawls. One document even mentions using wandering minstrels of questionable talent to distract guards with off-key singing. You tried it once. The lute player was so bad, you almost turned yourself in. Historians still argue whether these chaotic escape methods were common practice or only used when everything else failed. Either way, you've learned never to count on slipping out quietly. The body count isn't always limited to your target. Sometimes a guard falls. Sometimes a servant panics and raises the alarm. You don't like it, but guilt has to wait until your feet stop bleeding. You adapt. You stop assuming escape routes will work. You start carrying a pouch of nails for caltrops. You learn how to scale walls with bleeding fingers. Elm teaches you how to blend into a wedding party within 10 seconds, veil and all. You fake being drunk, injured, and once, very convincingly, a midwife. The laboring woman didn't even question it. Elm still calls you Mother Goose on rough days. There's one escape that haunts you most. It was a nobleman's manor, big and lavish, full of expensive things and paranoid people. You made the kill clean. But on the way out, a child maybe 7 years old saw you, just standing there in the hallway. You froze. She blinked. You pressed a finger to your lips. She nodded, never made a sound. You slipped out a window moments before guards arrived. You still think about her. Her small hand clutching a stuffed cat. Her wide, too knowing eyes. You wonder what she thought you were. A ghost. A dream, a warning you'll never know. Escaping isn't about running. It's about vanishing. About becoming no one the moment everything goes wrong. Sometimes that means diving into a barrel of pickled herring. Sometimes it means pretending to be a statue in a garden, motionless for hours while bugs explore your nostrils. Sometimes it means not coming back. You and Elm never talk about those who didn't make it out. You just light a candle in the next town. Let the wax run long, and whisper no names at all. Because in your world, it's not get in, get out. It's get away if you can. You don't scream. That's rule number 1 when you're being tortured. Don't scream. Don't cry. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing they've found something soft under all that grit and grime. You think about this often, not because you're morbid, but because, let's face it, getting caught is just part of the job eventually. And when you do get caught, welcome to the worst sleepover in history. It happens during a minor mission, nothing grand. Just a merchant with shady ties and a taste for betraying nobles during their bath time. He lives in a tower, easy entry, even easier kill. But you didn't count on his sister being a retired bounty hunter with hearing sharper than a hawk's. She finds you in the pantry, of all places, halfway through an escape. You don't even have your dagger, just a bag of stolen walnuts and a bad feeling. Next thing you know, you're chained to a wall, and someone's heating a pair of tongs over a fire. Medieval hospitality at its finest. Mainstream historical fact, medieval torture was less about sadism, though. Let's be real. There was plenty of that too, and more about extracting information, names, guilds, secrets. Devices like the rack, the strappado, and the pair of anguish weren't just legends. They were real. And yes, some were used on captured assassins who wouldn't play nice. You get the personal touch. No elaborate contraptions, just fists, hot metal, and too many questions whispered too close to your ear. They want to know who hired you, who trained you, who you report to. You say nothing. Elm would kill you if you did. No worse. She'd disapprove, which somehow feels heavier than death. So, you hold out. You count the cracks in the wall. You imagine your handler's disappointed face. You make up songs in your head to drown out the pain. One of them is about a duck who wanted to be a knight. It's oddly soothing. Fringe tidbit. There are tales of assassins who train themselves to pass out on command, to avoid extended pain or to fake death. You tried it once during training. Mostly just gave yourself a headache and a sore neck. Not helpful. Historians still argue whether torture was effective in the long run or just a show of power. Plenty of records show confessions given under duress, many of them later recanted or proven false. But when you're the one in chains, accuracy isn't really the goal. Survival is, eventually, someone helps you. Not Elm this time, a servant, young, wide-eyed, and curious. She creeps into your cell one night, slipping you a crust of bread and a whisper of sympathy. You don't ask why. Maybe she had a brother who was taken by soldiers. Maybe she's just tired of screaming. She smuggles you a nail, then a small key. Then finally on the 6th night, a dagger no longer than your thumb. You use all 3. You escape, barely, bloodied and broken. You stumble through the forest, each step tearing open a fresh wound. It's raining, because of course it is. You collapse near a creek, feverish and cursing the very idea of employment. Elm finds you 2 days later, covered in moss and muttering about talking frogs. "You owe me," she says, bandaging your ribs. You nod. You owe her, the servant, the duck song. Everyone and no one, the pain lingers. Long after the bruises fade, you flinch when someone raises their hand too quickly. You twitch in your sleep. You wake up gasping, unsure if you're in a bed or a cell. This is the part no one writes songs about. The aftermath. The scars you carry not just on your skin, but in the way you hesitate before walking into a crowd, in the way you double-check every bolt and door before you rest, in the way your hand always hovers near a hidden blade. Even when you're just buying bread, torture doesn't break you, but it bends you. You walk a little hunched now, maybe from the beatings, maybe just from the weight of knowing what people are capable of. You and Elm make a pact unspoken, but firm. Never get caught again. You train harder, smarter. You ditch old habits. You create new escape routes in every town you pass. You memorize the layout of every room you enter. Clock every guard's pattern. Learn how to pick a lock blindfolded and gagged. You don't joke as much for a while. Neither does Elm. There's a silence between you that only fades after a month, when she slips a dead fish into your boots just to see your face. You laugh. She grins. Life creeps back in. You start carrying a tiny blade inside your boot heel. You name it insurance, because now you know getting in is risky. Getting out is harder. But getting caught, that's the part you never want to feel again. You swore off poison after the first time. It wasn't the killing that got to you. It was the uncertainty, the creeping doubt. Did it work? Did they die in their sleep, or just get a stomachache and vow to cut back on spicy turnips? You never really know. Poison is for patient killers, quiet killers. Killers with access to rare herbs and the luxury of watching from the rafters. You're usually halfway down a well by the time the body hits the floor. But like everything in this line of work, poison eventually circles back, usually when the blade won't do, and slipping into someone's bedchamber feels more suicidal than stealthy. So here you are again, crouched beside a bubbling pot, sniffing a vial that smells like almond and rot. Elm watches with her arms crossed, chewing licorice root like it's the only thing between her and a breakdown. This'll either paralyze him, you say, or make him sing ballads for 3 hours. Either way. She shrugs. We'll be popular. Mainstream historical fact poison was a favorite among the elite in medieval times, especially in places like Italy and Byzantium. The Borgias were practically brand ambassadors. Powders in wine, toxic oils on combs, even poisoned gloves if it could be touched. It could kill. Some assassins even carried suicide pills to avoid interrogation. You tried biting into one once. It was a sugar cube. Training exercise. Still cried a little. You're aiming to take down a baron with a fondness for rare imports and a complete lack of manners. He's notorious for switching food with his tasters last second. So your plan requires subtlety, charm, and at least 2 backup ideas involving rope, a ladder, and a fake priest. The poison Elm cooked it up using foxglove, poppy milk, and something she claims is essence of mild regret. The dosage has to be perfect too much, and he drops dead mid-soup. Too little, and he might just get dizzy and accuse the cook of undersalting again. You don't deliver it directly. That'd be dumb. You go in as a spice merchant, offering exotic seasonings from southern isles. You sprinkle a dusting of saffron on the evening stew. It's not saffron, it's the mix. The Baron eats, then frowns, then sits very still, then slides sideways into his potatoes, gently snoring like a cursed walrus. Elm, waiting by the garden wall, is ready with the sick cousin cart you acquired just that morning. Together, you bundle him up still breathing, for now, and slip him out of the manor like disgruntled staff hauling off a drunk uncle. You take him to a cave outside town, where a small, very angry nun is waiting. She hired you, actually. The Baron stole her land, her sheep, and her wine casks. She plans to let him wake up in a locked cell, where he'll meditate for 10 years or until he weeps like Peter. You're fine with that. You get paid in silver and a jar of jam. You don't ask what flavor. But not every poison plan goes that smoothly. There was the time Elm mislabeled a vial, and you dosed a duke with what turned out to be fermented plum wine. He danced for 2 hours and proposed to his falcon. Then there was the noblewoman who drank the poison without hesitation, looked you dead in the eye, and said, "Finally, I'm free." You backed out of the room so fast you hit the door frame. She lived, apparently. Started writing poetry about death and peaches. Fringe tidbits certain assassin guilds trained members to build complete immunity to poisons through slow exposure. It's called Mithridatism. Elm tried it for a week, got a rash and swore off the practice. You're pretty sure you've developed an accidental resistance to bad stew, but that's about it. Historians still argue whether poison was truly the assassin's preferred tool, or just a backup when blades wouldn't do. It lacks drama, no satisfying thud, no whispered goodbyes. Just a slow fade quiet, untraceable, and often blamed on bad oysters. But poison teaches you something important: control, timing, patience. You can't rush it. You have to wait, watch, and hope the taster has the night off. You start carrying vials again. Not always to use, but to have. A comfort thing. Like a lucky coin, but deadlier. Elm stores hers in hollowed belt buckles and a locket she swears belonged to her great aunt, who may or may not have been a warlock. You don't trust poison, but you've learned to respect it. Because sometimes, the best kill isn't the loudest one. Sometimes, it's a soft sip, a quiet choke. A man slumped gently into his soup. There's nothing quite like riding a horse when you've just survived an assassination. Haven't slept in 2 days, and your thigh is bandaged with someone's old scarf. The horse hates you. You hate the horse. Mutual respect has not yet been established. Why do we never get the good ones? You mutter, gripping the reins with a hand that still smells faintly of poppy sap. Elm snorts from behind you. Her mount is slightly more cooperative, but still looks like it's contemplating throwing her into the nearest tree. Because the good ones belong to knights, she says, and we're the people who make knights disappear. You nudge your ride. His name is supposedly Chestnut, though Demon Mule feels more accurate, and it jolts forward in that jerky, jolting gait that says, I could end this partnership at any moment. Welcome to one of the lesser-known agonies of being a medieval assassin. Unreliable transportation. Mainstream historical fact. While horses were a staple of travel for nobles, most commoners, and yes, assassins fell under that umbrella, had to make do with old, rented, half-broken animals if they rode at all. A lot of the time, you walked, but when time mattered, or your face was wanted in 3 counties, a horse was your only way out. And what a way it is. This particular contract has left you 20 leagues from safety, on bad roads, in worse weather, with a very sharp deadline. The next town has a safe house with food and supplies, if you can get there before the guards figure out who strangled their magistrate with a lute string, Elm's idea. Of course. You'd run, but you've got a bruised rib and 1 boot half melted from stepping in alchemist residue. So, horses. Your current ride has 3 modes: slow plod, sudden panic, and mysterious stillness. You try to encourage him, whisper nice things, offer him half an apple. He sneezes in your face and continues ignoring every command like a noble at tax season. It's not just the attitude, it's the attention. Horses draw it. You can sneak across rooftops, vanish in crowds, and wear convincing peasant disguises, but try to ride unnoticed through a village on a horse and people stare. They assume you're important, or suspicious, or worst of all, wealthy. You once got chased by 3 children, asking for coins just because your horse didn't have visible ribs. And then there's the noise. Clop, clop, clop. It echoes. It alerts. It basically shouts, "Hey, assassin's here, possibly bleeding." You try wrapping the hooves with rags. It helps, a little, until the rags slip and trip the poor beast, and you both end up in a ditch, rethinking your life choices. Elm suggests a donkey next time. You laugh. She's serious. Fringe tidbit. Some assassins did use donkeys, mules, or even ox carts for stealthier travel. Slower. Yes, but easier to blend in. No one suspects the dusty guy riding a cabbage cart. You tried that once. Got pinched by a goose while hiding under the crates. Never again. Historians still argue whether assassins had preferred breeds or just took whatever was available. There's talk of elite spies getting Arabians or destriers, but for most, it was one-legged plodders with a drinking problem. You stop for the night in a thicket off the road, far from the nearest inn. Chestnut grazes nearby with all the sass of a retired bard. You and Elm build a small fire, boil something approximating stew, and check your maps by firelight. "We'll make it before dusk tomorrow," she says. "If the horse doesn't kill us first." You mumble. She smirks. "Think of it this way. If we die, we haunt him. That brings you a little joy." Still, you don't sleep well. Not just because of the hard ground and bug symphonies, but because of the sounds beyond the trees. A snapping branch. A hoofbeat too rhythmic. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe someone's following. You sleep in turns, one eye open. The next morning, Chestnut refuses to move. Elm finally bribes him with pickled cabbage and threats of becoming stew. He grudgingly trudges forward. You cross narrow bridges, wade through shallow streams, gallop well, awkwardly lurch past toll collectors with forged permits. You're spotted once, but not pursued. The cloak hides your face. The horse, somehow, adds credibility to your traveling herbalist lie. Finally, the safe house, a barn on the edge of a sleepy town where everyone minds their business and the local guards are too drunk to notice a blood-stained rider. You dismount. Every muscle screams. You wobble toward the door, muttering dark promises about retiring to a town with carts instead of horses. Elm feeds Chestnut the rest of the apple. He doesn't thank her. Of course not. You rest. You eat. You sleep. But the next job's already on its way. Another name. Another route. Another animal with too many opinions and not enough breaks. Because in the world of assassins, the real danger isn't just the target. It's transportation. You can hide in a crowd. You can dodge a blade. You can even fake being a priest and deliver a halfway decent sermon. But you cannot sneak past the plague. It hits the region like a curse hurled by a very vindictive sorcerer. One day, everything smells like stew and sweat. The next, it's ash and vinegar and something that makes your throat close just by breathing. The Black Death, they call it. You call it something worse. Mainstream historical fact. The bubonic plague tore through Europe in waves from the mid-14th century onward, killing millions, nearly a third of the population. In some regions, it didn't care if you were a peasant, a merchant, or an assassin with excellent rooftop reflexes. If it got into your lungs or your bloodstream, it was game over. You're in a mid-sized town when it starts. You and Elm have just wrapped up a relatively smooth job, a merchant who specialized in selling forged Saint Bones and cursed hairbrushes. Easy climb, clean exit, zero collateral. Then someone coughs, and coughs again. Within a day, The market shuts. The inns bolt their doors. Clerics walk the streets swinging incense burners like that'll scare off death. You see your first corpse dumped in the river the next morning. Elm watches from the shadows, her jaw tight. We leave. Now. But it's not that simple. The gates are closed. No one gets out unless you bribe the right guard or climb a wall so high even you hesitate. Worse. You've got a fever. Not a full one. Not yet. But enough that Elm notices the tremble in your hands, the sweat on your brow. You insist you're fine. She doesn't believe you. You hole up in a tanner's shed. The smell so foul, it actually masks the scent of sickness. You ration food. Clean your weapons. Try to sleep. Elm forces you to drink garlic water and chew something bitter that may or may not be bark. You argue. She glares. You drink. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval cures for the plague included smearing yourself in onions, bathing in vinegar, or applying a poultice of dead toads. One particularly bold method involved sitting in a sewer to balance the humors. You briefly consider it, then remember the last time you fell in a sewer. Never again. People die fast. In the street, in their beds, in doorways where they begged for help. No one comes. The town's silence becomes oppressive, like the buildings are holding their breath. You feel it in your bones. This job, it doesn't come with immunity. Historians still argue whether plague outbreaks truly affected assassin guilds in any organized way. Some records suggest operations paused. Others say it was business as usual, just with more masks. Either way, you're living the reality. One wrong breath, and you'll end up another nameless body in a cart. Elm eventually secures a way out 2 forged passes and a wagon bound for a monastery 2 days away. You wrap your face, slather your gloves in vinegar, and blend in with the group. No one speaks. No one touches. Even the horses seem subdued. The monastery turns you away. Too many mouths. Too much risk. You camp outside the walls like outcasts, sleeping under trees, watching the stars blink like they're counting who's next. You get worse. Not plague worse. Just exhausted. Worn down. The kind of sick that comes from too many miles. Too many close calls. Too many nights eating dried beans and pretending everything's normal. Elm sits beside you one night, silent. She offers you half a pear and a quiet truth. If you die, I won't bury you here. Too close to this place. You nod. Put me in a barrel. Float me downriver. I'll fill it with garlic and toads. Of course you will. You don't die. Somehow. You recover slowly, stubbornly, like the kind of weed that grows through stone. You move on. The next town is still breathing. The streets are open. The job is waiting. But you move differently now. Slower. More cautious. Not from fear of a sword, but fear of a cough. You wear a scarf even when it's warm. You wash your hands like a cleric possessed. You avoid crowds, even when they're the best place to vanish. Because in this life, you expect betrayal from men, from kings, from enemies with knives. But the plague, that's betrayal from the very air. There's something uniquely infuriating about killing the wrong person. Not just because you messed up. Not just because someone innocent now has a suspiciously dagger-shaped ventilation issue. But because, in your line of work, a mistake isn't just a mistake, it's a receipt. You're in a city this time, bigger than most. Stone streets, 5 churches, and 3 brothels that double as information hubs if you ask the right questions. You and Elm have been following your target for days, a minor noble with too much coin and not enough caution. He's tall, wears a purple sash, likes pickled eels. Pretty hard to miss. Except, it turns out 2 people in this city wear purple sashes and enjoy questionable seafood. And one of them just happened to be a visiting ambassador with a very protective entourage and a fondness for executing suspicious strangers. Oops! Mainstream historical fact. Medieval guilds, whether for assassins, thieves, or masons, often enforced their own internal rules, complete with penalties. Kill the wrong person. You didn't just feel bad. You got fined, punished, or worse, blacklisted. Some organizations believed a single misstep could jeopardize the entire network. So, yes, accountability mattered. Even for people who smother nobles in their sleep. You discover the mistake about 30 minutes after the kill. You're crouched on a rooftop, watching the aftermath unfold. Elm is beside you, eating dried figs like it's a play. Then she nudges you. "That's him," she says. You frown. "No, he's already..." "Nope." She points again. And sure enough, your actual target is strolling down the street, very much alive. Sash pristine, eel on a stick in hand. You both groan in sync. Fringe tilpit. Some guilds had elaborate rituals for atoning after a misfire. A week of silence. A month of manual labor. A vow of abstinence, which was mostly symbolic, unless you had company. One particularly dramatic group insisted on tattooing the mistake onto your back in runes. You once saw a guy with what looked like 3 separate paragraphs etched into his skin. Probably not a model employee. Back to your dilemma. The ambassador's death triggers an investigation. Not just local guards, but foreign agents, people with real armor, real coin, and the kind of questions that start with, "Where's the body?" and end with "Burn down the district if you must." You and Elm vanish. Sort of. The guild's not happy. You're summoned by courier ink-smudged note. Wax seal. No signature. You both know the location. An old wine cellar, deep under a crumbling tavern where the bartender never makes eye contact. You go. You sit. You listen. The handler doesn't yell. That's not his style. He just lays out the facts, like meat on a board. Wrong kill. Wrong person. Wrong consequences. The fine. Half your payment. Plus 1 job for free. You agree. You don't have a choice. Elm mutters something about ridiculous sash codes and stomps off to find stronger wine. You lay low for weeks. No big contracts. Just message runs and intel drops. Boring work, but necessary. Reputation is everything. If people stop trusting your blade, they stop hiring. And when they stop hiring, you start starving. Eventually, you're offered redemption, a target in the countryside, a noblewoman who's blackmailing 3 different abbots and embezzling cathedral funds to decorate her cat's wardrobe. Elm raises an eyebrow. At least this one deserves it. You double-check everything. You interview servants. Watch her for a week. Confirm the sash, the stride, the weird twitch she has when she drinks wine. You get the right woman. You're sure. The job goes smooth. Too smooth. You leave a single coin in her palm, a guild symbol. A quiet message. We were here. We're still good at this. You return to the city. The guild wipes your slate. You're back in the game, but the guilt lingers. Not just for the ambassador, but for his family, his guards. The ripple effect you'll never fully see. Somewhere, a clerk is writing a report. Somewhere, a child is crying. Somewhere, another assassin is being hired to correct the imbalance. Historians still argue how widespread guild enforcement really was. Some say most assassins were lone wolves, improvising their own codes. Others argue that large cities had complex networks rules, punishments, even training schools. You've seen both. You've lived both. Mistakes happen, but in your world, they cost more than coin. You and Elm sit by a fire that night. The city, a distant glow on the horizon. Do you think he had family? You ask quietly. She doesn't answer right away. Then, everyone does. You nod and say nothing more. Because some wounds you don't speak aloud. You just keep walking. Faith gets strange when you're paid to kill people who believe in it. You've lost count of how many times you've crept into a chapel, slinked past a flickering candle, or hidden behind a statue of some saint you don't know the name of. And every time, the irony stings a little sharper. Tonight's no different. You're kneeling among monks in a cold stone sanctuary, pretending to pray. Your hood is low. Your eyes scan shadows. Somewhere near the altar stands your target, a knight commander of a sacred military order. He preaches humility, vows poverty, and yet somehow owns more silk than the average queen. He's also been quietly funding mercenaries to torch villages accused of harboring heresy. Mostly peasants, mostly harmless. But heresy is flexible when land is involved. Elm sits across the aisle, disguised as a novice. Her robes are too short. She hates it. You can tell by the way she keeps picking at the sleeves like they're going to bite. Mainstream historical fact. Religious orders in the medieval world didn't just chant and copy manuscripts. Some, like the Knights Templar, were powerful political and military forces, with vast networks and enormous wealth. Others, like the Hashashin in the Islamic world, were religiously motivated assassin sects that blended faith, loyalty, and targeted elimination into a grim art form. Your target tonight wears a cross around his neck, solid gold, ruby at the center. He kissed it during the last prayer. You wonder if he thinks it forgives him. You know better. The plan isn't to kill him here, not in the chapel. That'd be suicide wrapped in sin. You wait! Patient, quiet, shadowy. Just another robed figure among dozens. Later, after Vespers, you follow. He retreats to his private quarters. Big doors, heavy locks. But you're not going through the door. You go under, through the crypt, through the tunnels monks pretend don't exist, through an ossuary packed with skulls and jawbones that stare like they're judging your life choices. You emerge behind a tapestry, step into his study, and wait. He enters. He removes his gloves. He notices the candles flickering oddly. Too late. Your blade meets his throat in the quiet between prayers. No fight, no noise. Just a gurgled word that might have been mercy. You leave him beneath his cross, face frozen mid-question. Elm is waiting by the southern wall, already removing the novice robe. That was fast, she says, faster than his penance. You both leave through a side gate guarded by a boy no older than 12, who stares at you like he knows. Maybe he does. Fringe tiltbit. Some legends say the Hashashin were so feared that entire cities surrendered rather than risk a single knife in the night. Others suggest their reputation was as carefully crafted as any blade. Fear as weapon, rumor as shield. Historians still argue whether these religious assassins believed they were divinely chosen or simply well-trained fanatics. Some describe visions, oaths, rituals. Others suggest it was all a performance to keep recruits loyal and targets terrified. You've never seen visions, only consequences. Still, faith follows you like a stray dog. People you kill often whisper prayers at the end, sometimes to saints, sometimes to gods you don't recognize, sometimes just to the air, begging anyone to hear them. You wonder if there is something after this. What will it say to you? Elm once said she believed in balance, not gods, not justice. Just wait. Every death goes on a scale, she said, rubbing grime from her blade. Eventually, it tips. You asked which way. She never answered. You stop in a town a week later, sleep in a convent converted into an inn. The woman who runs it used to be a nun. She serves stew with a smile and blesses you without asking questions. You thank her. You don't deserve it, but you thank her anyway. Sometimes, people ask if you're part of a cause, a holy order, a secret divine mission. You laugh. The only holy thing you've ever carried is a crust of stolen communion bread, once used to smuggle a tiny dagger. But faith lingers, in candlelight, in silence, in the smell of incense that clings to your cloak long after you've fled the scene. And sometimes, when you're alone, really alone, you catch yourself whispering too. Not a name, not a prayer, just something. Because maybe, just maybe, the blade isn't the only thing watching. Retirement, they said, a quiet cottage, a warm fire, maybe a goat. You've thought about it more than once, usually, when your knee cracks climbing a third-story window, or when your breakfast tastes like last night's regret. But retirement isn't really a thing for people like you. There's no pension for poisoners, no guild-sponsored beach house, just survival, and the fading hope that maybe one day, the world forgets your face. You're in your 30s now. That's old, by assassin standards. Your reflexes are still sharp, but you've got scars that itch when it rains and a shoulder that refuses to stop clicking. Elm says you sound like a cursed marionette every time you stretch. This job, it's supposed to be your last. One final mark, one final paycheck. Enough to vanish, really vanish. Not just from guards, but from everything. Buy a tiny farm, plant carrots, raise ducks, forget the smell of burning pitch and blood-washed stone. The target is a duke, the kind with too many enemies and not enough sense. He's paranoid, keeps triple guards and swaps his schedule hourly. But his worst trait, he has children, grown ones, ambitious, and angry. The kind who'd hire people like you after you retire, just to balance an old grudge. Elm says nothing when you tell her, just looks out the window and chews her lip. She's been quieter lately. So have you? Mainstream historical fact. The idea of retirement didn't exist for most medieval professions, especially not for killers. You worked until you couldn't. Then you vanished, or got vanished. Some legendary assassins became teachers. Others tried to become monks. A few just disappeared into folklore whispers behind cloister walls and tavern tales told with lowered voices. You don't want to be a tale. You just want peace. The plan is clean, subtle, discreet. It goes wrong almost instantly. The Duke moves early. A new mistress. A change of heart. A suspicious vibe in the air, who knows? What matters is that you're still in the vent above his bed when he's not in it. And suddenly, there are boots storming the room and someone shouting, "It's a trap." You dive, roll, dash. Elm's voice in your ear. East Hall. Now, you sprint through tapestries, slide down a banister, nearly impale yourself on a pike rack. Someone throws a torch. It misses. You wish it hadn't. You make it to the stables. Barely. Elm's already got the horses. Of course she does. You ride like the wind's trying to arrest you. Through fog. Through rain. Through woods where every branch wants to clothesline you into early retirement. You make it, but barely. And now the Duke's kids. They know your face. You don't stop running for weeks. You sleep in sheds, eat moss, speak only in gestures. Elm develops a limp. You twist your ankle in a rabbit hole and shout so loudly a nearby farmer starts a rumor about haunted fields. Retirement's looking less like a cozy dream and more like a bad joke. Fringe tilbit. Some assassins faked their own deaths to escape the life. Burned cloaks. Drowned lookalikes. One infamous killer staged his execution using a corpse stolen from the gallows and a bribe to the right monk. He lived another 20 years in a village making chairs. You try something similar. You and Elm stage a fire. Leave behind scraps of clothing, some blood, a dagger bent in a way that suggests struggle, the right witnesses, the right rumors, the right kind of silence. You vanish. You settle far north, a forest edge, a small cabin. You pay a mute carpenter to build it, and he never asks why you dig the cellar deeper than necessary. Elm plants herbs. You mend tools. You learn to live slow, but it never leaves you. The twitch when someone walks too close. The instinct to scan every crowd. The urge to sit with your back to the wall. Even retired, you're not out. You're just quieter. Historians still argue whether any assassin truly retired without consequences. Did they find peace? Or just a slower way to die? You wonder, sometimes, who else got out? Who faked the right death? Who's planting potatoes in silence? Same as you, listening for footsteps in the dirt. Elm finds you one morning staring at the forest line. She asks, "Do you think they'll come?" You answer, "Eventually." She nods, then adds, "We'll be ready." Because even in retirement, your job hasn't really changed. You're still surviving. You just swapped city rooftops for pine needles. They say the shadows forget you after a while. That's a lie. Even years into hiding, when your cloak has turned to a threadbare coat, and your days are filled with chopping wood instead of people. The shadows remember, and they whisper. You hear it in the creak of floorboards at night, in the wind that moves too suddenly, in the way travelers pass your cottage with eyes that linger just a little too long. It's quiet now. You and Elm have carved out a routine simple, deliberate, ordinary. She keeps bees. You keep chickens. You've learned to bake bread without burning it. And she's developed a fondness for herbal teas that smell suspiciously like things used to paralyze people. The peace is real, but fragile. One morning, you find a coin on the windowsill, small, blackened, etched with a crescent. Not currency, a message. You show it to Elm. She doesn't say anything, just breathes out through her nose and sharpens a knife. Someone out there remembers. Maybe an old guildmate. Maybe the child of a mark. Maybe someone you never even saw, just collateral in a job you barely remember. Mainstream historical fact. Vengeance was generational in the medieval world. A grudge could outlive the man who caused it. Whole families devoted themselves to settling scores passed down like heirlooms. Blood wasn't just spilled, it was inherited. You and Elm start preparing. Not panicking, preparing. You reinforce the cellar door, bury traps in the garden, map out blind spots in the tree line. It's muscle memory now. The way your hands check the windows at dusk. The way Elm sleeps with a blade under the pillow and one eye half open. You never say the word assassin anymore. Not out loud. But it lingers like old wine in a cracked cup. And here's the thing, no one tells you. Even when the killing stops, the weight doesn't go away. You carry every face, every job, every almost mistake, every breath you stole and every one you almost lost. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of Eastern Europe, people believed assassins who died without penance returned as spirits unrested, unrecognized, unburied. Their job wasn't finished, so neither was their death. Elm once told you that. While carving a wooden whistle, she didn't say what she believed, just kept carving. Historians still argue whether figures like you shaped history or just skirted around its edges. Did you shift kingdoms? Prevent wars? Assassins are the footnotes, not the chapters. Always there, just never underlined. You never find out who left the coin. Weeks pass. No one comes. But you don't relax. Not fully. Not ever. One afternoon, a traveler asks if you know the way to the next town. His eyes are too sharp. His hands too smooth. Elm answers, smiling. You watch his reflection in the water barrel until he's out of sight. You don't follow, you just wait and breathe and sharpen. Because the stories lie. There's no glory in being forgotten, only relief. You still dream sometimes rooftops and ropes, locks that won't open, faces you didn't mean to see. You wake before the end, always. You and Elm sit by the fire most nights. The chickens rustle in their coop. The bees hum softly in the dusk. It's peaceful, soft-edged, almost enough to believe in. Almost. Do you miss it? She asks once. You think, then answer, no. She nods, then adds, me neither. And neither of you believe it. But you let the lie sit between you like an old friend. Because in the end, history might twist your story. Legends will grow. Tales will warp. They'll say you were shadows, ghosts, names carved in silence. But you'll remember the cold stone, the wet boots, the missed meals, the aching back, and the silence after the job. Because being a medieval assassin, it sucked, and it still haunts you. But now, finally, you haunt it back. Now breathe, just for a moment. Let all that fade, the whispers, the running, the blades hidden in boots. It's over now. Picture yourself not in a forest hiding from enemies, but somewhere warm, soft candlelight on stone walls, maybe a little fire crackling low. Not too loud, just enough to keep the room from feeling cold. You're not waiting for a message. You're not watching the door. You're just resting. Your hands are clean. Your feet no longer ache. The air doesn't carry the smell of vinegar and sweat. It smells like fresh bread, like pine wood, like peace. Elm's already dozing in a chair near the hearth. Her knife still tucked in her belt, just habit now. Even in sleep, you can tell she feels safe. And for once, you do too. There's no need to sharpen your thoughts anymore. No weight on your chest, no name on a list. Just silence, the good kind. The kind that lets you breathe a little slower, blink a little longer. The shadows aren't chasing you. They've moved on. Found someone else? You're not their concern anymore. So, as you lie back, let the old aches drift away. Let the story settle. The fire's low now. The night is quiet. And so are you. Sleep well, Shadow Walker. You've earned it.